Hi, I'm Kevin Lee. I run the eMarketing Association. I also run Did It, which is a full service ad agency with digital at the core. I've got with me Carol Martindale from Leadfeeder and wanted to talk a little bit about taking anonymous web traffic and turning that into leads. So Carol, not everyone realizes that platforms like Leadfeeder can identify companies or organizations arriving at one's website. Can you explain briefly how Leadfeeder generates leads from website visits?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just magic. No, honestly, it's the same way as if you were to install a little JavaScript code on your site to install like Google Analytics or maybe like a Facebook Pixel or Google Tags, right? And so what Leadfeeder does is we're able to read that data and identify anonymous companies through IP address, okay? And if I break it down to simplest form, businesses have registered IP addresses and then usually static, they don't change. And this data is pretty much available in like commercially available databases. But the tricky part where Leadfeeder takes it a further step is what about people who work from home, right? Yeah, that's the question everyone's wondering. So we have a little bit of magic in there where we can identify dynamic IP addresses, which is typically registered to people working from home, your average internet or like small businesses. And actually over the past year or year and a half since the pandemic started, we've seen an uptick of over 30% more data identified in addition to all the business IP addresses.
Right, right. Well, my team uses Leadfeeder and we love it. We also noticed that a lot of companies, particularly larger companies, even when people are working from home, often they're VPN into their
That's also
corporate
very true.
headquarters, right? So, you know, while technically they may be on a different IP address, that's not the IP address that our web server sees. Our web server sees their corporate IP address, and so it's easier to see who they are. So do you have any tips on for salespeople and marketing teams, you know, as they see companies coming in? Obviously, the bigger the company, the less sure you are of who it might have been, right? So what's the best practice for, you know, doing outreach, you know, outbound marketing to companies who showed up in your lead feeder?
Yeah, I get that question. My team gets that question on a daily basis. It doesn't get old. And it makes sense, right? What do you do when a company visits and they have 10,000 employees? Well, I would ask that same question. Like if you're an outbound salesperson and you have an account list to go after, what do? Right? So you go after your ICP and like, they're generally, maybe 5 to 7 stakeholders that you should be nurturing, right? Except with Leadfeeder, you're ahead of the game because now you know the content that they're looking on your website, that you know how they found your website, so you can go into these conversations more prepared. Or perhaps even in Leadfeeder, you can see the exact location of the visitor, right? So in this day and age, like, well, at least with big companies, they have offices nationwide, or maybe they're working from home. So you can look on LinkedIn to search by location, job title, and whatever it may be, right? And then you narrow it down and then you start building your relationships as you normally would.
Do you find that most Leadfeeder clients actually mention the fact that they saw that there was a visit, or do they sort of just keep it on the down low and pretend that they're just reaching out completely cold?
It can be a little bit big brotherish, I say, but I've seen companies successfully just go ahead and say it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but it does work. So it takes a little bit of trial and error. Otherwise, you can go into it just saying like, hey, I know your team is actively looking for a solution like XYZ. This is what we do, right? And people usually don't hesitate or anything because like everyone's always filling out a form somewhere or another, right? They, registering for a webinar, downloading a white paper. So yeah, it just seemed like it's right time. Like, wow, you reached me at the right time while I'm doing my research.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So I guess most people like to consider it a happy coincidence, even though it's not really a happy coincidence.
That's probably the better way to do it. But honestly, people wouldn't be surprised. You just be like, hey, I know you're on my site.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know obviously a lot of folks, it's in the name, obviously Leadfeeder is feeding leads to the sales force. But, my team also really loves the fact that, we see it as a feedback loop, a data feedback loop, because, they're often doing proactive outreach to folks who have not visited our site, but then they see the person show up either as a result of a voicemail message or as a result of an email that we sent out. So we're essentially stimulating the site visit. And so again, it is a little bit big brothery, right? To know that an outreach that you did or a touch point that you had as a salesperson resulted in some curiosity, but it certainly helps my sales team know whether or not that curiosity is there and whether they should bump up the importance of that lead a little bit as a result of that curiosity. Have you heard that other Leadfeeder clients are also using the platform that way?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. Like validation is always good. And honestly, with emails, you can track opens and clicks, right? So that's like something's out there. So it's really not that big brother if I think about it. But like you said, you should still be picking up the phone and calls. So that's harder to track. And so, like you said, it helps you prioritize your time and kind of bump them up and they're like a hotter lead. But I also like that you brought this up because a lot of times when people think of Leadfeeder, they think of it as using it just to find new leads, right? They only want to pay for new leads. And I'm like, no, like you should use this for current deals you're working because now you can be more timely with follow-ups or go into the next conversation being prepared with like knowing like, okay, they checked out your pricing page or perhaps knowing that more than one stakeholder has viewed your site. So on Leadfeeder, you can see how many different individuals from the same company are visiting. So the more there are, the further along they are in their buying, the decision-making process, right? So there's just so many elements to Leadfeeder and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a non-obvious use to some people of Leadfeeder. Are there any other ways that people use Leadfeeder that isn't really obvious?
Yeah, and this one surprises me a lot, but the marketing aspect of it. When I start talking about marketing, and you know what, maybe we can do a better job at communicating this on our website, I admit it, but marketing attribution is a big pain point for marketers, right? And so what we do is we kind of close that data gap and tell a complete story because now you don't have to rely on form fills, right? Now you can show your team's like, look, because of these efforts and these channels, we're still bringing the right traffic in, and we know that they are the right audience based on the industry they identified, the pages they're viewing, et cetera, right? And then you can tie that data in with like Google Analytics, Google Ads, your CRM, which we also integrate with CRM systems, and then present it in like one nice dashboard, like for example, on Google Data Studio to paint a full story.
Cool. So, when there's a lot of leads coming in, right, and you sort of have to start prioritizing because obviously you want to get to the hot ones first, or you want to maybe get to the big ones first. So there's sort of size of opportunity, but there's also the level of importance of the lead. Do you recommend that people use filters like that, like either, they visited the contact us page, or as you indicated prior, the pricing page, like we should definitely go to those first? Right? Or maybe it's just purely size of opportunity and filtering it that way. What are the best ways that marketing teams and sales teams use the filtering if they have like a high volume website? We're talking about, hundreds or thousands of leads a day. You have to sort of make sure you get to the most important ones.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most useful features we have with Leadfeeder is our filtering options, or we call them custom feeds. Which allows you to segment your data based off many different variables. For example, maybe it could be like a big company visiting your site, but if they're looking for a job, it could just be someone intern looking for a job, right? So that doesn't indicate buying behavior. So yeah, you want to put in the behavior, like what pages are they looking at or not looking at, right? And then are they part of like the industries that you serve or the markets or the geography? You could filter in many different ways. So of course, yes, after we recommend that. And from there, once you build these reports, you can automate the process really easily, right? So for example, if your sales team is broken up by geography, so you build a different feed for each territory. And then if someone hits your site, matching those filters you set, they can get pinged automatically by email, by Slack, or a task can be created in the CRM system, kind of to streamline the data.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes a good point. I had to tell my sales team, fairly early that, because we serve colleges and universities,
Yeah.
either our direct mail division or our digital marketing division, that,
Yeah.
hey, don't get too excited because, look more carefully.
Yeah.
If they're visiting our careers page, that's a job hunter, 95% chance. And so it's not somebody in the marketing department. And so the ability to filter by destination page or by their behavior, their web-based behavior throughout the site. That's a key way to at least eliminate some of those leads that are not actually hot.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excuse me. So we talked a little bit earlier about sort of whether you should reference Leadfeeder or the fact that some information about the fact that the visitor may or may not have been to your site. Do you find that that some people have been really successful with regards to almost doing lead gen for you by explaining that, oh, we saw on Leadfeeder that that you visited our site, and then if they're selling to a B2B customer, then you just got a lead right as a result of that, because then the marketing department's gonna be like, really, that's possible? And has that ever happened where you've gotten a client because one of your existing clients referenced Leadfeeder?
In an ideal world, I would love for our users to be name dropping us. A lot of times they don't like to reveal their sources. However, with agencies, yes, because we partner with a lot of marketing agencies, and if they're doing their prospecting like that, they'll often drop Leadfeeder because now it's another opportunity for agencies to extend their service. Like, hey, we can do the same for you, get you started on there and get the ball rolling and give you this intel. Yeah. And certainly internally, our sales team, when we definitely say, we use our own product to find you. And that's where the wow moment typically is. So we have an advantage because it's our own product, so we can freely say it. But I don't know if others are actually doing that.
Yeah, we were considering taking screenshots of the Leadfeeder page, right, of the individual company profile and using that when we did the outreach. But most of my sales people thought it was a little bit too creepy, right? And so they decided to just make it a happy coincidence. There's a lot of features you guys have added, since we started using the platform, and I'm sure that there's some more features coming soon that people might want to know about now if they're sort of trying to decide whether to implement Leadfeeder or not. Are there any features that you think are coming soon that people should know about?
Yeah. Gosh, when you talk about how long we've been working together, it's probably 3 or 4 years, and my mind just oh my God, what happened in the last 3 or 4 years? My mind wants to explode. A lot has happened, but I would say this year up and coming, and I'm not even, my tech team would probably really get so mad at me if I review something, because you can never make promises when it comes to the tech team, things are, but one thing I can say is I have form tracking available as a beta feature. So which means that if someone fills out your form, we can start tracking the specific individual. Okay. And that's great because now you can see the visit behavior before they fill out the form. And then if they return, it's that exact person and not someone else at the company. So that's great. In addition to identifying individuals, we do have integrations with HubSpot, ActiveCampaign, and MailChimp that allows us to track individuals as well. But if anyone's interested, I can get into detail separately with whoever's interested in that. So that's another awesome thing. And we're also moving towards our ABM efforts. So you can start streamlining the data and perhaps retargeting on LinkedIn or through other ads based off of Leadfeeder data. Or being able to personalize your website or landing page based off of the company or knowing who's on your site at that moment in time. So those are just sneak peeks of bigger things that we're working with certain clients in beta right now. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing those come out of beta, and I'll ask we don't get a tremendous number of lead forms, right? But I'll ask my internal developer whether he wants to implement that or not on our lead form so that we can get a chance to try that out.
Let me know. My team will just flip the switch for you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for chatting, and look forward to keeping up and seeing how Leadfeeder evolves over the next couple of years.
Right. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Right. Bye.